Let's begin today the way we began last week. We're in a new series, week 2, of how to get what we really want. How to get what you really want. And I'll start by asking the question Ken asked. What do you want? What do you want? It can be a tricky question when we're asked that because, we'll come up with some things and some of them are probably good. But running in the background of our minds, what drives a lot of us, drives a lot of our wants is simply this. We want our way, right? I want my way. We want to do what we want to do, and we want it now. But as Ken pointed out last week, there are problems with this. If we always get our way, we lose our way. Right? We've seen that. We get in our own way. He also said that if we always do what we want to do, we end up where we don't want to be.
If you're a kid, doing what you always want to do got you grounded, right? And you wound up where you didn't want to be. If you're an adult and you continue that pattern and do what you always want to do, you probably wind up in prison at some point. I'm not kidding. If you always do what you want to do, you'll end up in a place you don't want to be. If we get whatever we want right now, we may not get what we really want later. We've seen that work out. And then Ken left us with this idea right here we're gonna push deeper into this week. Lurking in the shadows of what we want is what we value. I say lurking in the shadows because there's very little in our culture, in the media, there are very few relationships that will focus your attention on what is really important, what you value. Most of our world is not going to be much help here. And we're asked all the time, what do we want? And we're taught, we get this reflex to think, what do we want now? This is who I want to date. This is the job I want. This is the thing I want to buy. This is where I want to live. This is what I want my wife to act like. This is what I want my husband to act like. This is what I want my kids to act like. This is what I want my parents not to know about right now. But with all of those wants, lurking on the edges somewhere is what we actually value. For example, if I were to say, what do you want relationally? You could tell me, well, I want to get married. That's great. I hope you do. What do you value? What do you value? What's behind I want to get married? What do you really want relationally that marriage will satisfy as far as you know? What do you really want financially? Well, I want to be rich. Well, of course. Okay? But why? Why? What do you really want financially? What's the need that's supposed to satisfy? And out in our peripheral vision somewhere in the shadows are values that we rarely stop and think about. It goes deeper. What kind of person do you want to be? I'm begrudgingly going to let Ken handle most of this question next week. Maybe you got some career goals or whatever, but who do you want to be? Who do you want to be? These are values questions. These are the deeper things, the value questions that drive us past our surface wants and on to how to get what you really want. Because we will never get what we really want until we discover what we really value. We'll never get what we really want until we discover what we really value. And I think God created us to work this way. I really do. But even if you're not a Christian, you're not a church person, you're just here checking out your friend's church to be nice, that's cool. This should still ring true with you a bit because you've probably seen it in your own life. You'll never get what you really, really want until you've nailed down, you've discovered what you actually value underneath it all. Now, as Jesus followers, as Christians, we take this one step further because we believe there's a God who made us, who sent his son Jesus into this world, which we specially celebrate every Christmas. We just got through that season. And Jesus came to make a way for us to call God Father, be part of his family. He gives us purpose. And an interesting thing about Jesus is that Jesus consistently pointed to value instead of want. Jesus consistently took his audience past what they initially want to what they would ultimately want. Jesus taught us to think this way, that we'll never get what we really want until we discover what is most valuable. And we believe Jesus points the way to that. But even if you're not willing to stretch that far with me today, you can probably at least still see that you need to figure out how to discover what is most valuable to you. So is that it? Are we done? If we figured out that's what we need to do, the rest should be easy, right? Do a little exercise, a little bit of reading, think it through, write a couple things down, presto changeo. We have what's most valuable, and we just go from there, right? It's all cake. Almost. Not quite. There are a couple things to help. We'll get to one of them at the end today, but we aren't there yet. We need to focus on something else today to be ready for that. And the problem is this. Choosing what is valuable is not natural for us. Choosing valuable is unnatural. What feels natural is actually often deceptive. Am I right? I'm not telling you anything you don't know, right? Okay, I'm building a platform here. The reason this is difficult isn't just because we lack discipline. It's not because you don't know enough, you lack information. We don't solve this problem with a certain blend of new information and better discipline every New Year's with resolutions, okay? It goes deeper than that. There is an internal conflict that we're all very familiar with between what comes natural and what we really value. And they're fighting each other. And many people don't break through the natural to embrace the valuable. But for those who do, and I know there are some here who have, and they can raise their hand and amen, brother, whatever to this. And I want it for you. And ultimately, I think you want that for you. That when you can choose valuable and do that consistently, your life will change. Your life will be transformed. But it isn't an easy battle to win. The Apostle Paul describes this better than I think I've heard anywhere else. His letters to churches make up half the New Testament, okay? Wrote a ton of stuff that God had his hand on it to teach us for years and years in the future. So we talk about Paul a lot. He went from greatest enemy of Christians in his day to maybe the most passionate follower of Jesus. So something happened that made a very, very fundamental change on the inside for Paul. Something happened, something that really got him excited about something he hated, okay? So we need to figure out what that is. He was a quick study. So when he started following Jesus, he became very good at teaching and explaining what it means to be a Christian, what's different. And he wrote a bunch of teaching letters to help churches understand this stuff so that everybody else who was believing in Jesus could be as excited as he was. And one of these letters was to the young but very quickly growing church in Rome. And Paul hadn't been there yet, but other Christians had gone on ahead. And the message of Jesus was spreading like wildfire in these early years. Within 15 to 20 years after Jesus' death and resurrection, there were already hundreds of Christians in Rome, which was a long ways away. This was blowing up. The world's never seen anything like it. So there were a bunch of people in Rome hearing about Jesus and believing that, it sounds like there's legit evidence. He rose from the dead. And if I follow him, he's going to forgive my sin. He's going to give me hope for life and eternity. And that's great. They were getting excited about that. But they didn't know a whole lot else yet because this was still pretty new. They were still figuring it out. And they didn't understand as much about how giving your life to Jesus changes your life from the inside out, makes you a new person. And what's that supposed to look like? So Paul writes to them some of the highlights because he knew they were trying to figure this out. And about halfway into this letter to the Romans, Paul writes something we could call a life verse. Have you ever heard of a life verse? Maybe you have a life verse. It's one of the, to be honest, kind of the goofy things we Christians do. We'll pick out one verse out of the whole Bible, and we'll think that captures the theme of our lives better than anything else, and say, this is my life verse. Okay, and if you have a life verse, I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm just poking fun. I'm not making fun. I'm just poking fun a little bit. There's too many for me to narrow down. I mean, I could get it down to maybe 50 or 60, but one life verse, really? Okay, but this one might work, okay? This is one that Paul gives us that all of us probably can identify with. Paul says in Romans 7, I do not understand what I am doing. That's a great life verse, right? Right? You're going to take that home, you're going to put it on your mirror, engrave it on a plaque, get one of those fancy calligraphy, whatever, decals to hang on your entryway, and guests come over, and that's my life verse. I do not understand what I'm doing. Maybe you've got reservations about the Bible and its ability to relate to life today. I don't know, but this part should be easy, right? This part we get. It's obviously true. Most of us don't have to reach all the way back to 2019 to find something we did that had us standing in front of the mirror going, you idiot! Why did you do that? Why did you eat that? Why did you sleep in again? Why did you call her back? Why did you say yes? Why did you agree to that? Why did you buy more of those? I do not understand what I am doing. Let's think it through a minute. Why don't you do what you want to do? What is wrong with you? What's wrong with me? That's the point of today's message. There is a conflict we're dealing with between what we value and human nature. It's a big deal. It really is. It's not just about being a bit more disciplined. It's deeper than that. And Apostle Paul, he says, I do not understand what I'm doing. Okay, we're with you on that, Paul. We got it. And then he says, because I do not practice what I want to do. There's our word, how to get what we really want. I do not practice what I really want to do. Well, so Paul, this should be easy. If you know what you want to do, just do it, right? He says, I do not practice what I want to do, but I do what I hate. He's being so transparent. It's kind of a brain teaser for a minute, but he's being really transparent. He's saying, there's something that I really want, and I know what I really want, but I settle for something less than that, and I end up hating it. And if we were to be extra honest with ourselves for a minute, I think there's some of you here today, if you're honest, you hate yourself because of what yourself has done. And you were there the whole time yourself was doing it. And you'd like to blame your mom or your boss or the whole world or the system, but right now you kind of hate yourself because you know what you've done. And Paul's saying, you know what? I understand that. I get it. I get it, because if I continue to do what I don't want to do, after a while, I hate what I do, and hating what I do is just about a half inch away from hating the person I see in the mirror. And maybe that's where you are right now. And I know that it's an awful place to be. And you know this is a big deal. It's a wrestling match. It's an everyday thing. It's a multiple times a day thing. And Paul says, I know. I get it. And he goes on, and if I do what I do not want to do, I agree with the law that the law, is good. What does that mean? Here's what he's talking about. Paul was a Jewish man. He had been a leader in a particular group of Jews called the Pharisees. You might remember that from Jesus yelling at the Pharisees all the time because they were messed up. Because these guys were the best at keeping the law. They actually overemphasized doing the right thing. They took it to an insane level. Okay, they were rule-keeping professionals. And of these elite rule followers, Paul was one of probably the top 5 very best. He was at the top of the class. Okay, so he knew about doing the right thing. And this was before he was a Christian. Honestly, I think most of this chapter, he's relating to the Romans by telling them, I know what it was like before I found Jesus to have this struggle. And when you put it together with the chapters that come after that, you see this kind of progression as we find Christ, what he does. And we're going to get to that. But he's reaching back to that time in his life saying, I know, I identify. I know what it is to try to do good and you fail. Because he's looking at this and he wasn't what his community would have thought of as a bad person. Because he was a great rule keeper. The problem is he was too much of a goody two-shoes. And here he's saying, as hard as I tried to be good and as much as I was committed to this law from God, I just couldn't pull it off like I felt I needed to. As hard as I tried, and I knew what I really wanted, I just couldn't do it. I didn't have it in me. So it was good for there to be a law. I couldn't keep myself in line. So I agreed that the law was good. Now, when we think about law today, we're not thinking about the Jewish law handed down from God, usually like Paul had. But just to make it easy for us all here in 2020, let's just consider that general sense of right and wrong that you live with every single day. And we can kind of substitute that. It'll get us close. Maybe you're not sure you want to commit to what you know is right all day, every day. But you know you want the people around you to commit to what they know is right all day, every day, right? Okay, so we know right from wrong, but we still have trouble pulling it off. Paul explains a little bit further. He says, for I know that nothing good lives in me, that is in my flesh, all by myself. And we'll explain that here in just a minute. For the desire to do what is good is with me. He said it's in me. I have the want to, but there is no ability to do it. I can't carry it out. For I do not do the good that I want to do. There's our word again. But I practice the evil that I don't want to do. Now that should actually make us feel better, okay? The guy wrote half the New Testament, and he's somebody we can relate to. Here's someone with both feet planted firmly on the ground. It sounds like he's been in our shoes and hated himself and doing things he didn't want to do. And what's his point? What we naturally want, and we all basically share the same natural wants. What we naturally want is often in conflict with what we ultimately want, okay? And why is that? Because nature knows nothing of justice. Nature knows nothing of compassion. We like to say nature's beautiful, and in many ways it is visually, but mostly from a distance. When you get super close to most of nature, it's dangerous, potentially harmful. There's no forgiveness. There's no generosity in nature. There's no grace in nature on its own. And in much the same way, humans kind of naturally go with their inclinations. And in case you need a list of what that looks like, it's usually lying, cheating, racism, adultery, me first, revenge. Those are the natural instincts a lot of times. So when we embrace nature, this is what we look like for a while. And then we look at those 6 things and we kind of have to say, yeah, that's a pretty good way to undermine your own future. That's a pretty good way to undermine your own career. That's a pretty good way to undermine your own hopes and aspirations. Paul wrote another letter to the churches in the region of Galatia, and they were struggling with this concept too. They're trying to figure it all out. So Paul explains in chapter 5 that God's Spirit that he puts inside of us when we commit to follow Jesus leads us one way, while our sinful nature leads in another. And he says they are opposed to each other so that you don't do what you want. And Paul uses the term sinful nature and flesh kind of interchangeably to describe our natural human state. That's what he's talking about. Our natural human state is actually a sinful nature. He likes the word flesh because it contrasts with the spirit, and it's easy to keep straight. And I get the word sinful might put some of us off a little bit. Doesn't exactly paint us humans in the best light. But we don't paint us humans in the best light. Jesus talked about it. Paul explains it more based on what Jesus taught his followers. And they teach there's something wrong with you and me. At our basic natural state, there's something wrong with you and me. There's something fundamentally broken. And I know we want to resist that, and it doesn't feel good, and it's not polite to say. But I think the only proof we need of that is to think about, do you ever do what you don't want to do? And you don't know why you do what you do? Yeah. That's kind of the obvious answer. It's because there's something fundamentally broken. So Paul talks about our sinful human nature, our broken human nature. And when you follow the desires of your sinful nature, the results are very clear. And he goes on to tell the Galatians, I don't even need to tell you what the results are. You already know. But he gives them a list anyways. And here are the things he says, and we can identify with some of them. Sexual immorality, moral impurity, promiscuity. 2 words we don't bring up much anymore, idolatry and sorcery. Idolatry is basically making anything more important than God in the way that you speak or behave. Good indicator for you, and if you're not a Christian, maybe you might recognize it as putting things in front of people too, because that's not the plan God has for us. So if we're doing that, we're putting other things in front of God. Sorcery might sound like an easy pass. Well, no, I don't do that. Can't remember the last time I drew the circle and maybe some of you can. It is a real thing. It's out there. And he's like, well, no, that's not me. But sorcery essentially is trying to control people. Okay, that's what sorcerers do. That's what wizards do. That's what magic and the pursuit of magic is about. It's finding ultimate control over your own life and over your circumstances, and then controlling and manipulating other people. That's why people pursue this stuff. They'll say it's white magic and I do it to help people. No, you're trying to find control in yourself to be able to control your life the way you want it. Paul says that's not good. It's a natural thing to want. It's not good. Well, he goes on. Hatreds, strife, jealousy, outbursts of anger, selfish ambitions, dissensions, tearing people apart, breaking relationships, factions, cliques, envy, drunkenness, carousing, and anything similar. This is a happy sermon, isn't it? Aren't we having fun? The comparison trap, celebrating when other people have a setback. That little bit of vindictive glee you get when you see the guy that blew past you at 110 caught in the speed trap a mile. Don't pretend that's simply rejoicing at justice. I know you. We've all got a little ugly in us somewhere, right? I think we're all a relationship or two away. We're a family member or two away from someone who would honestly say, this isn't what I wanted. I don't know why I do what I do, but it's destroying my family. It's destroying my finances. It's destroying my career. Maybe has destroyed all those things. This isn't what I wanted. This isn't what I set out for. And we've got to acknowledge that we've all got the potential to do the same thing. There, but for the grace of God, go I. That's not in the Bible, but it's very true. It comes naturally to go that direction. No matter how disciplined you are, it's a daily battle. Okay, but I didn't bring us here just to wallow in self-pity. Okay? Oh, we poor humans. No, we're in the state right now, but we're also in the series right now because this is a battle that can be won. We're not doing this all by ourselves, are we? The cycle can be broken. You can embrace the valuable over the natural. There's a way to stay set on what you really and truly want, what you were created for, what you were designed for. We can do it. Let's look at a letter written by James. Ken read some of this last week from a different part of this letter. This is Jesus' half-brother, became the pastor of the church in Jerusalem, was one of the first pastors. And if that's not a testament for Jesus having risen from the dead and being worth following, I don't know what is. I mean, can you imagine your brother saying, yeah, he rose from the dead, follow him. But now James is pastoring the first church in the world. So he's writing this letter, and he's got a lot of good stuff to say. That was just kind of an aside, by the way. I get tickled out of that. And this statement James is about to make, it's powerful. It's pretty gritty, which is good today. Gritty is kind of the in thing right now, right? You know, for any TV show to have any hope of succeeding, you've got to be able to describe it as gritty. So James says, but each person is tempted when he is dragged away. Let's say that together, dragged away. Dragged away. When we read that, we kind of tend to just go right past that. We don't think about it much. Maybe because it's, for very few of us, have ever been dragged away since since we were a kid. You know, we just haven't seen that in a long time. But this is so visual. This is so visual. I love the picture. It's a picture of someone that's trying to do the right thing. They're trying to respond the right way and develop good habits. And they're trying to embrace value. And they're trying to embrace what is really, really important, what they really want. And then something comes along and drags them away. That's the battle. That's where we live. That's the struggle. That's valuable versus natural. And James says they're dragged away by their own evil desire and enticed. They knew what they wanted, but they get dragged away. Then he came along and dragged me away. Then she came along and I let her drag me away. This opportunity came along and it dragged me away. I got too busy at work and it dragged me away. That old habit raised its ugly head again and it dragged me away. And James goes on, then after desire has conceived, it gives birth. After desire grows and conceives, after a while, it gives birth to sin. And sin, when it is full grown, gives birth to death. Ultimately, sin kills stuff. Ultimately, sin undermines the future. Ultimately, sin undermines the way we see ourselves until we come to that place where we say, you know what, I don't know why I do what I do. I don't know why I do what I do. I'm starting to hate myself. And the next thing James says is where I want to land today. He's thinking about the people who would have this letter read to them. Probably wasn't thinking as far ahead as people who would have this read to them by LED lights, what he wrote by candlelight. But he was thinking of other followers of Jesus like you and me that were going to read this. And he really loved them and he really cared about them. So he wrote, don't be deceived, my dear brothers and sisters. Don't be deceived. Why does he say that? Why does he say that? I think because he knows how easily deceived we are. We like to think we're better than that, but are we? He knows how easily distracted we are with what we want now, and we forget what we ultimately want, what we really want. And if he could, I think he'd reach across 2,000 years, and he'd grab us by the shoulder, and he'd look us in the eye, and he'd say, don't be deceived. Please, don't be deceived. Don't be deceived. Come on. Let's not trade ultimate for immediate. Don't trade ultimately want for naturally want. Students, don't be deceived. College students, don't be deceived. Newlyweds, don't be deceived. Singles living in a city where no one's reinforcing you with this, no one's helping you with this, don't be deceived. Men and women out traveling, don't be deceived. Men and women struggling in your marriage and you're starting to look around, starting to feel dragged away, don't be deceived. Don't trade ultimate for immediate. Do not trade valuable for natural. Don't trade valuable for natural. And I kind of sympathize with James when I hear him and I see him write this, and because it gets to me when I see men and women and students and children, college students, making decisions that undermine their own future, that undermine God's best plan for them. And they do what they don't want to do, and it keeps them from getting to where they want to be, and it breaks my heart. And part of why that is this: there's enough things in life we have no control over. There's enough out there. There's going to be enough bad stuff that you have no control over. There's going to be enough making it difficult for you in your marriage that you have no control over. Making it difficult to graduate that you have no control over. So why in the world would we undermine what we could influence by choosing what comes natural instead of what we ultimately value? This is such a huge part of why I think it's so important we choose to follow Jesus. Biggest decision any of us will ever make. Because when we come to Jesus, when we surrender to his leadership, we confess our sin and say, God, you've known for a long time I was broken, but I'm realizing I'm broken and I've done wrong, but I receive the forgiveness you have the right to give me because you died for that sin. I don't have to pay that penalty anymore. So I've received that. And when we do that, he gives us his nature. He gives us his nature. Being a Christian is more than simply aligning yourself with one of the world's faith systems. He puts his spirit inside of us so we can make our decisions and our choices based out of his nature and not the broken, sinful nature. He gives us another way to choose. And that to me is incredibly exciting. Now I start to understand a little more why Paul got so excited about this Jesus thing, because I don't have to be stuck anymore. I don't have to live that cycle out anymore. Jesus gave me something else that I can use to choose. Paul says over and over and over throughout all of his letters that who we were before we started following Jesus died. That should be over. That's done. And he means that when we choose to give Jesus our lives, we get to be part of his death and his resurrection. That gets to apply to us too. And Paul teaches the Galatians in chapter 2. It's a great verse. And he teaches that he's been crucified with Christ. He says that our old sinful natures died with Jesus, and the life we now live is Jesus inside of us. That's what baptism means. It's telling everyone in this community around you that you are taking part with Jesus' death when you go down into the water, and you're identifying with this new life when you come back up. That's exciting. You're considering the old you dead, and you're now living a new life in Jesus. So James says, don't be deceived, my dear brothers and sisters, because he knows how easy it is to remember the little thrills, the pleasures, the attractions that we once enjoyed when we did live by the old sinful natures. And if we don't change the way we think and prioritize our values to line up with the new nature Christ puts inside of us, it's very likely we'll continue to make old choices, make old decisions. If you've ever wondered, well, if Jesus gave me a new nature, why do I still want to do bad stuff? It's probably because we're still thinking the old way and making choices based off of that. We'll still choose the cheap highs because they're easier and they're more convenient. We might still selfishly step on people to get ahead because we're not paying attention to what's most important day to day. We'll still waste as much time on dumb entertainments instead of investing in people because we're thinking the way we used to think. I've spoken with several ex-smokers, and they'll tell me that what sometimes makes it hard for them now isn't the physical craving anymore. That's actually been dead a long time. It's not the nicotine driving them. They said if they have a moment where it gets hard, it's usually remembering some of the peaceful moments of the old habit. It's that quiet moment out on the porch after dinner. It's that mental habit, the remembrance of a good moment, and they'll forget all the rough stuff. So they've learned they quickly have to get their mind on something else, because the longer they dwell on that memory, the harder it will be to walk away, even though their body isn't dependent anymore. As in their nature isn't driving them, but they have this memory of the good moment, and that can still pull, that can still draw. And James knows how easy it is to remember some of the nice moments and forget the regrets that come after. We forget how the sin that happens when we give in tends to break things in our lives. And James knows the world around us still wants us to think like it does and be attracted to the same things we used to be and keep choosing natural over ultimate. So it keeps trying to sell it to us every day. This is what you actually want, right? You remember when this was really fun for you? Don't you still want that? And that's hitting us day after day after day. And James is trying to say, please don't be deceived by that, because it's not you anymore. Don't let it stick around long enough to drag you away, because if you do let it stick around long enough, it will drag you away. And you'll see more destruction happen. The old nature will keep trying to speak into your life, but Jesus gives us a way out, which is what's so awesome. Ultimate versus natural is a battle we fight every day, but with Jesus, we fight it with hope and with purpose because the old nature isn't the only voice speaking anymore. Paul says in Galatians 5, live by the Spirit, walk by the Spirit, and not by the flesh. Live by the Spirit and not by the old nature. Live by the nature of Christ in us and not by the broken human nature you used to have. This message is all over his letters. And if he prods us so many times to live by the Spirit instead of the way we used to be, it tells me Paul is convinced it's possible. You may think it's impossible. You've tried so hard before. But Paul's saying, no, this is possible. You don't have to live out of your old self anymore. We can choose ultimate over natural each day in different situations. It doesn't have to be as hopeless and frustrating and confusing like it used to be. So how do we do that? How do we do that? I want to get really practical here as we're getting ready to finish out here in a few minutes, because we've been talking some big concepts that I think are really, really exciting. So I hope you take some time to study this out and let it sink in. And we needed to do that. But I want to get really practical. I want to bring it down to earth here. Paul writes later on in this letter to the Romans in chapter 12 that we are transformed by the renewing of our minds. You've probably heard us preach that before. You might have read it before. Read through Paul's letters and make a note of how many times he talks about us putting on the mind of Christ or the knowledge of God. This isn't New Age stuff. It's not mind over matter. He's simply saying we need to get the way we think to line up with the new nature Jesus put inside of us. And that's something we have to do. God changes your nature. You've got to start changing the way you approach life. If you follow Jesus, you've got a new nature. But if you're still thinking like you have the old one, your life probably won't change a whole lot. It'll change some, but you're still going to notice a lot of patterns. So we stop thinking and prioritizing our lives on the old way. We learn to think and prioritize our lives and interact with people and pursue values with God's perspective, and then we see our lives transform in amazing ways. Some of you have already seen it happen. So if you see somebody scratching their head, mark him out and go talk to him after I'm done and say, no, what he was talking about is real. It's real. It happened to me. If that's the case, how do we renew our minds? How do we do that? How do we change the thought patterns and habits so it lines up with our new nature we have from Jesus? I want to give you 3 things. And I'm going to do this quick because we talk about it all the time. We're going to keep talking about it, so you won't have to worry about forgetting it, okay? You may already be doing some of these, but now maybe you understand a little bit better why we push it so hard, and you can get more mileage out of it. 1, read the Bible. If you hate reading, that's cool. Find an audio version of the Bible. There's some really cool ones out there, okay? There are so many ways the broken human nature still tries to influence us. It calls at us every day from so many avenues. You'll never be able to shut all of those voices off. It would be very impractical to try. And to be honest, you need to get good at navigating life, thinking like a Christian, and thinking the way God wants you to think. So you don't have to try to shut all those voices down, but you can make sure those aren't the only voices you hear every day. Okay? You balance that with God's lessons and God's thoughts and the life examples he put together for us in the Bible. You aren't going to understand everything you read right away. You know that already because you've tried. And you're like, Levita, what and who and how and this and what does Aaron have to do with? Okay? Just keep pushing through. And you'll hit stuff that you can understand, that God wants to speak to your heart. And then after you get through it, start working through it again. Find a different Bible reading plan that changes up the order or whatever. And the next time you hit that confusing spot, maybe you'll understand a little better because you actually read this over here. And, that was talking about. Okay? Keep at it. If you want to talk more about the Bible, you mistrust it, you don't think it's relevant, I'd love to have more conversations with you. I just don't have time for all that right now. But I would welcome those conversations. 2, talk to God throughout the day, every day. None of this is really that hard yet, right? Talk to him about your life. Invite him into various parts of it. Talk to him about issues other people are having. First, because we as Christians believe God is a real person who cares and actually wants to work in your life and in their lives and guide you through situations. And it's really cool when that happens. So talk to God about all that stuff. If you don't know what to talk about, tell him you wish you had a different color car. You wish you had a car, or you wish she'd look the other way because her face is putting you off. Yeah, God doesn't care, okay? Talking about all the dumb stuff, and then every now and again you'll come up with something that really matters to you, and you'll be in a habit of talking to him about that too. God is big enough. He can handle the problems in Iran and listen to you drivel on about whatever. He likes it, okay? So drivel on. Second, we do this talking to God throughout the day because it keeps you thinking about him. And it makes it harder to choose the stupid stuff you choose when you forget he's around. Just being honest, okay? Third, connect regularly with other Jesus followers. I don't think I can stress this enough. You need people around you that can understand what you're trying to do and encourage you when you make mistakes or you're confused about how to tackle certain problems. You need to be in a position to encourage them when they're facing the same thing. God designed us to be a big family that complements and strengthens each other. I don't see anywhere in the Bible that advocates you going off to live by yourself as a Christian somewhere in the desert. Okay? I really don't. And personally, this is me, God didn't say this. Personally, trying to be a Lone Ranger Christian is about the stupidest and ungodliest thing you could do. If I could just lay it out on the line. Okay? You don't have to do church the way everybody else around you does church, but you need to be connected with other believers and you can reinforce each other. Okay? Just being blunt. Do these things. And then keep doing them. And then keep doing them. Don't stop at the end of this week. Keep it going. You renew your mind by being aware of and making choices about which voices speak into your life. So choosing to listen to the Holy Spirit through the ways that he wants to talk to you is the first step in living by the Spirit and not by the flesh. Okay? So we're more aware of this underlying conflict. And I want to close this out. We're ending here. I want to land this with some even more practical steps. So in choosing valuable over natural. So if you're not a Christian, you really don't know about this two natures thing, and spirit and flesh kind of weird to you, that's fine. We can continue talking. This part will still help you out. You can put this into practice today. Put a couple blanks on the back of your outline that I'd like you to think through and fill in this week. Don't do it today. Think through and fill it out this week. 1, in choosing valuable over natural, you have to ask, what do I really want? You got to know that. We'll never get what we really want until we determine what we really value. So I want you to come up with 3 things. There could be more by the time you're done, but at least 3. And once you think you've got a good answer, ask yourself why you want that, to see if there's a deeper thing that you're trying to satisfy with that one. Like, you want to get married? Great. Why? What need are you feeling that you think getting married will satisfy? Find the value underneath the want and write that down. 2, what keeps dragging me away? And this part can be just between you and God. You don't have to bring it up at small group this week. You don't have to tell your husband or your wife or your parents about it unless you want their help with something. That's cool. You can do that. But you can keep this yourself because I want you to be really, really honest with you and with God so you can clarify where you've been getting off the rails. What keeps dragging you away? And write it down. And the third thing is a little bit different, but I want you to actually take this as seriously. How long? How much longer? How long do I plan to let what I naturally want drag me away from what I ultimately want? It may seem like an obvious answer to you. Well, I don't want to do that any longer. Well, you've been doing it for years now. So how much longer really? How much longer really? Another 5 years? Another season of your life? Another 3 years? Another marriage? Wait till your kids are gone? You're going to wait till, and I hear this from a lot of singles, you're going to wait till you're married? You know, once I get married, it's all going to be different. And all the married people said, no, it's not. How long? Come up with a number and put it down. How long are you going to live it out the same way? I'd like the worship team to come up, and we're going to close with a little bit of a worship song just to give us a moment to just focus on Jesus and say, Jesus, I hear what you're saying to me, and I want to talk some of this out here real quick and kind of cement this morning. Give some time this week to these 3 questions. Nail down what's important, what's really of value. Would you stand with me? If you're not a Christian, but you do feel intrigued by what we've been talking about, and you're like, wow, I didn't even know being a Christian was about all of that, about being a new person and all that, I would encourage you, cry out to God today. You don't have to have special words. You say something effective. God, yeah, I've been broken, and Jesus, I want to invite you into my life. This guy today was telling me that you'd forgive me for all the brokenness I'd have, and if I choose to follow you, you'll put a new nature inside of me, and I know I need that. And whatever words you want, just call that out to God and begin talking to him. Open a conversation. And I can't encourage you enough to do that. Maybe you've been a Christian for years and years and years, and you're finally actually figuring some of this out. Then, wow, okay, I've got some stuff I need to do here so that I can line things up with the nature that Jesus has put in me, and I can live the way he wants me to live and really see some freedom from some stuff. As we sing this song and we're praying, and after, and you go throughout the week, I hope you keep working through this and keep talking to God about it and asking him to lead you a little further. Let's pray. Father, thank you so much for offering us new chances, offering us new opportunities to start over, for a new life. Thank you, God, for all of us. Thank you for wanting to be close to us. Thank you for sending Jesus to make all of this possible for us. And I pray that you would help us be able to choose the ultimate over the natural, over the temporary, over the immediate, today and tomorrow and Tuesday, and as we keep going on in life. And Lord, we ask that you would begin to do some more of those new things in us, and you'd help us get our hearts and our minds straight with what you're doing on the inside. And we want to follow you, God. We're committed to you. We want to honor you and live your life because of the life that you put inside of us, because you've loved us first. In Jesus' name, amen.